Welcome back to another Terranscapes video. This video, we are going to take a look at the ocean boards, in particular the surf, the foam, and the waves, as well as the vegetation against the back. And I think I'd said in the last video that I was going to do the whole layout of them, and that's not true. I'm going to do a third video that shows the layout of all of the boards and make that kind of a showcase, no theory, no practice, just how do they look and how do they tile up. So at the end of this video, I thought I would include some reflections on the project and some of the lessons that I learned, and I have a feeling that they will be helpful to somebody out there. Maybe not you, maybe you know, but I have a feeling maybe somebody will take a little something from it. So that will be at the end of the video. So let's talk about the boards. As I've been working on them, I realized that something had gone astray with the foam behind the waves, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, and I did a couple different iterations, didn't quite look right. So I ended up going back and looking at the pictures that I had done when I did my, if you go into the Wayback Machine, you will see that I did a video just talking about studying waves. And each time that I looked at those photos, I was looking at something different, right? My eye would focus in on something as the dominant, input, and that might have been the waves and their shape and how they were breaking. And I don't think I really looked at the foam close enough. So when I went back and I took a look at them, I saw that there was a circular net pattern in the foam, not circles, of course, but if you look at this photo, you'll see, right, that there's a soft roundedness to the way the foam is collecting. And I also noticed that there are little patches of white, almost like little tiny white caps where the foam is meeting, and then the foam gets faded out as it moves away from it. Those little white caps, I mean. So that was a big kind of like, oh, moment, and it really made me go back and change the foam one more time. So that's what I want to show you first off, and it'll be easiest to show you that if we go take a look at the bench. So having looked at those photos, you can hopefully see, especially if you've been following the project, that I've changed the look of the foam, and I really ended up going back in and putting in more of a net pattern, and tried to work in some more circular movement in the foam, really. I mean, you can really still see underneath some of the linear action that I had going before, and that's fine now that it's been kind of over-coated, and you can see some of that effect, but it works well, and I really can't believe how much doing some of this little touch-up with the little white highlights, and really picking out some of these areas and bringing them into a little bit more of a, of a coalescing, I guess is kind of the word, where it feels like the bubbles have coalesced into these little mini white peaks, mini wave peaks, I guess is what I'm kind of thinking of them as. In order to do this, I went back in and I went in with some very, very thin lines of what I'm using basically is a thinned down gloss medium, or maybe matte medium actually. It really doesn't matter, because then I'm dabbing. Let's go with dabbing. And then I'm dabbing, stippling is the word I'm looking for. Then I'm stippling on some glass frit, which is basically a very, very fine white powder glass. And that is covering the medium in any case. But getting the right viscosity to get a good line, and also to have it stick the right amount of frit, is not something that just happens. You really have to practice with it and play with it in order to get that effect, because some of these older areas, this is too much absorption, and then there's layers that are over it. This is like, I've gone over this, literally I've done this like 4 times. Some of these several boards I actually stripped all of the foam off pretty much, put it all back on, didn't like it, did another iteration on top of that, then I did this one on top of that. So you know, practice makes perfect. It's not like this just happened my first attempt. But I'm really, really pleased with how they look now. This is so much closer to what I had really envisioned. So I also went back and I retouched all of the actual fronts of the waves. And there were a couple reasons why. Some of the coatings that I had put on to cover areas and color shift and you know, when I was doing the polyoptic and all these different things, you know, had gotten a little bit on the waves, so I needed to kind of just touch those up. But when I was looking, you know, the waves had you know, different effects basically, because when I had made them with the it's been a while since I did it. The clear sill caulking and they had a sort of pressed in look. It looked almost like somebody was playing with like green stuff or something, you know, and that really wasn't the effect I wanted. And I had cut white into it, but it wasn't as bright as some of the areas were, so I needed to brighten up the whole front as well. And so what I ended up doing then was remixing a new batch and basically going over it again and going for a softer look in the wave texture and get something that looks a little bit more billowy. And I think it really made a huge difference. It feels so much more natural looking. Originally, I wasn't sure how stiff of a peak I'd want to make in individual areas to show, you know, motion. And in the end, just having it be sort of a rolling, soft look captured the feel a lot better. And brightening them up really makes them, they pop right off the boards, but also matches when you look at waves. It's a very, very bright white because you're getting a perfect, you know, refraction, maybe reflection? I don't know, it must be, it's not prisming, it's shooting all of the light back to your eyes, which is why you see it in white. Anyway, it's very opaque, it's very bright white, and so I really needed to push it more white, and I think it really captures that a lot better now. And in fact, you know, coming in and doing some of these highlights in the foam, you know, reflects some of that, and brightening them up helps to make sure that it feels like foam, like it's white, it's part of the waves, and that color improvement really helped to tie it in together as well. So one of the other big improvements, right, that came right at the end, and this is part of, you know, the project taking so long meant as I worked on it, some aspects got better and better over the period of working on it. Excuse me. And so in this instance, the wave splashes against the cliff. On this, you know, these are some of the best. All of the cliffs have similar, you know, effects, but, you know, this just showcases it because there's quite a few. I really got a much nicer, much more airy feel. This is really what I kind of wanted originally and just didn't know how to get it. And this is, you know, like a gauze teased and then coated with, you know, water gloss gel and tinted, you know, and it takes practice to get the teasing right and the amount of gloss gel to cover areas and still leave, you know, areas that are wispy, and also, you know, to paint them without, you know, covering up stuff. It took me several boards, you know, and if you look at the earlier boards, you'll see that they're not quite as airy and wispy as this. So I really, really love how it came out on the cliffs. That was a really big plus for me. You know, as much as I may say, you know, and I'll point out the things that aren't working, I'll do that, but it's nice to be able to say at some points, you know, these really hit the mark. So I was very pleased with these, and I think this really shows them to good effect. And so lastly, what I wanted to show you was the final, you know, version of the vegetation along the shore. And what I ended up doing was going with something simple. I think frequently I get a little too zealous in the types of plants that I add, and looking at some images of shorelines, there usually isn't a crazy amount of diversity. So what I decided to do was to go in for some shore grasses, and it's difficult because they're really, usually in very large, very dense stands. And in order to use this grass, it would be ridiculous to try to put in, big drifts of them. So instead, what I did is put in, clumps, try to give it a little bit of density, and then instead focus on giving the tops of them a little bit more of a natural look. So what I did is I actually bent them over with a soldering iron to try to give them a little bit of a windswept look. And the bend in them has not necessarily stayed quite as prominently as I would have liked. It's there, but it's not quite as strong. But in any case, the effect that it gave to the tops of them looks so much better. I've never done this before, and I just felt like, it looks more like grasses. So victory there, and I wanted them to just have like a, ooh, like I'm really getting blown in the wind, and that just was a little tricky, because if you play with them too much, they melt. So I did that. And then what I did is I followed in behind with some grass tufts, just to make a little bit of a height transition, so that these aren't just like all alone out there on their own. It feels like it visually takes you down to the board by having another stair, if you will, to come down, and then these little tiny tufts make the last little transition. But again, I didn't go too heavy on them, and I wanted it to be natural, be kind of random, put in a big patch up here, feel like there's something going on, but don't be afraid to have little areas as well, to try to give it some variation. But this, I think, came out very well. I was pleased with this. This was the only thing that was simple, quick, and only got done once. So, yay! Thank goodness. But I did enjoy this quite a bit. Oh, and people are probably going to ask, this is Woodland Scenics grass. They're like packages of long straight grass, and then you just cut them to fit, and then I just use a little hot glue to stick them down. Be gentle though, not too much hot glue or it'll show. A little practice there will help get you there. So anyway, that is a look at how the vegetation was finished. Oh, and just as a caveat, and if you look back at any of the footage of the cliffs, I didn't put really anything on the cliffs, and the reason being, and so now you have to imagine a cliff, is that the top of it needs to be able to accept buildings, which means I can't put a lot of vegetation on the top of it, at least in the center. So if I put it around the edge, it's going to look like some kind of weird donut, especially if there's no building on it. And I didn't want to put stuff going up and down the pathway, because then it was like, oh, well, why did it stop on the pathway and not continue to the top? So I ended up just leaving the cliffs just open grass for that reason. And maybe it's just too harsh of a climate over there to grow tall plants. But that was the consideration that I made, and I think it's the right call, at least in my opinion. So anyway, there you go. There's the shore vegetation and a little bit about how I did it. So the next video will show the complete layout of all the boards, as I mentioned, but I did want to share some key points that I learned during this project. And they were some of the hard lessons that I learned, but valuable actually. And so, you've got to learn them at some point. This project was instructive. So the first thing that is going to be a huge goal for me going forward is total reduction, and if possible, elimination of variations between pieces. In this project, for instance, I had variations at the board edges, the way they might meet. They were towed in different directions. Of course, there were the cliffs and trying to get those quarters to match up. There was the color of the water and color shifting that, the depth of the water. All of these things, all of them created major problems in trying to correct. And when you're doing a small project, a tree stand or a small, outcropping or whatever, you may have small variations. Maybe it doesn't quite fit, but they're small and you're not matching it to a bunch of other pieces, and a little putty here, a little putty there can fix it. And as the projects get bigger and more comprehensive, that becomes an issue. And I've decided that I'm going to have a very, very low tolerance for variation in the planning stage. What am I going to be doing, and how do I make sure that that's going to lock up solid every time compared to this piece, or interconnect, there's a tight seam, whatever it is. And if I can't do it the way I want to, and won't give me that kind of variation, then I want to find another way to do it. So that's a huge goal for me, because the variation in this has been a very difficult aspect of it. The second thing is to tightly plan the order of operations. This project, I did several things at the wrong time, and then had to go back and either redo them or enhance them or remove them or whatever, and it was really caused by not having done something this big. So it's not, I'm not bashing myself for it, but the order of operations, the steps, what's the steps in what order, it's a lot easier to grasp when you're doing a small project, or even and I've done lots of sort of table-sized modular boards before, but they're very familiar from going from a small to a big. Basically, I'm taking all those small tactics, I guess I'm at war with my terrain. Taking those techniques, right, and just doing them on a larger scale, but it's the same idea, in terms of the order of soil and vegetation and whatnot. But with a project like this, which was, utilizing quite a few new techniques, I really didn't think about exactly how the layers should stack in terms of literally the layer stacking, and also how I'm going to approach those steps, those layers. So I have potentially a very big project coming up, and that is going to be a tremendous focus for me, is before I touch anything, do quality diagrams, step back, exactly what steps are going to happen in what order. The bigger the project, the more important that becomes. Lesson learned here. That's a big goal going forward. And the other thing that I took away from this is the importance of doing all of one stage all at once. And whether it's I'm doing the crashing of the waves, I'm going to do the crashing of the waves on all the boards. That's what I'm doing this week. The hard part with that, with a big project like this, again, this is not like I didn't do a good job. There's some challenges to that, because I don't have space to put out all of these boards. Like when I'm pouring the water, I can't pour all 20 boards at once. I just physically don't have the space for it. And I can't have all 20 boards out easily to look at all of the waves as I'm working on and making sure I'm not drifting, So the size of this project makes that a little challenging. But I found at the end, when I was retouching up the foam behind the waves for the fourth time, maybe, and doing the touching up the fronts of the waves, which I think was my second pass on some of the boards, for touch-ups, I mean, that just saying, okay, I'm just doing the foam and do them all, and it really helped to unify it. Now, again, that was several passes into it, so there was already a lot of stuff going on underneath it, and that meant that second pass or fourth pass was a little faster than it might have been otherwise. And the other caveat with that kind of a mentality on a project like this is the mental stamina it would take to be able to do the same step on each board over the whole time. I mean, doing the surf on a board, from waves and the foam, assuming I didn't have to touch them up at least 2 of the 3 times or whatever, you may be shocked, but maybe 20 hours. So doing 200 hours of waves and foam straight in a row, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know, for me at least. So it's not like, oh, that's going to be easy to do and I'll do it every time, but it is something I need to keep in mind. And that's going to also tier in with that order of operations, right? If I don't think I can have the stamina to push through a stage all at once, then I need to think about how can I break that down in a way that will help make sure I retain uniformity. Maybe I do them in halves, and when I start the second half, right, I pull out 5 of the boards and I really make sure that I'm matching those 5. Because sometimes one drifts a little, and then yours drifts a little from that, the next one, and now you're further away from this board, right, if that makes any sense. So you kind of have to see the big picture to make sure your little part fits that really well. So it's a challenge. It's not easy when the projects get big, but it is something that I really came to realize is going to be very helpful the next time I tackle something large. So those are a few of the sort of concrete lessons that I got from this project. And I have a Q&A that I actually have shot, and I didn't finish it. And one of the last question, I think, was asking me about the length that it has taken to finish this project. And that's approaching it from a slightly different angle. So I'm not going to talk about that here, and I will address that in the Q&A when it comes out, which should be pretty soon after this video since it's mostly shot. Let's just shoot the last question and get it out. So stay tuned for that if that's something you're interested in, get a slightly different perspective on how my head has been doing with this project, and why it's taken so long. Some of it's me and some of it's not. It's a crazy project. Crazy. I don't know. I'm learning. Hopefully you're learning with me. You know, I always say that we're a team. We're learning together. You guys help me, try to help you. You know, we make it better between us. So I appreciate that. So hopefully you'll come back and join me for the next video, which will be the showcase video. We'll see how it all looks together. I'm pretty excited. I think it's going to look pretty good. It's certainly going to look big. I think we can all assume that's going to happen. It's going to look big. So hopefully you'll come back to check that out, because you know that I'll be back soon with another Terranscapes video. Might be helpful for other people. You know, certainly learn from me, because I think I have some tips that I can provide that don't like this at all. Oh, God. Take it from the top. Anytime you want to get this right, I got all night. So the next video, look at the lens.